C2 is a unique character in Code Geass and provides philosophical commentary from a perspective that no other character can share because of her unique position. Because of this, she's always had an air of mystery about her. It doesn't help that she's aware of one of the biggest reveals in the entire series from the very beginning and keeps it to herself the entire time, but even beyond that, you can never really tell what she's thinking. This mysteriousness captivated me when I was a child watching Code Geass for the first time, and still does to this day. I always wondered what it was that C2 wanted in return for the Geass that she granted Lelouch, and when it was revealed that she really just wanted to die all along, it really struck me. I couldn't help but wonder why. C2 went from being a poverty-stricken slave to being Empress of the world. Her life is too vast, and too many details of it are unknown for us to cover everything in one video. But we can take a closer look at the more momentous events and how they may have influenced her. She started off as a young slave who had no one to care for her, and was at the mercy of a series of cruel masters. Due to these circumstances and her young age, she was totally vulnerable and fragile, until she attained her Geass power from the unnamed nun. Suddenly, she had the power to grant any wish she wanted, and she had been so deprived of her human needs that she hardly even knew what to wish for. Ultimately, her deepest desire was to be loved, and her Geass allowed her to compel anyone to fall in love with her. Interestingly enough, her Geass worked on me despite the fact that she had lost it when she got her code centuries ago. Her life quickly changes for the better, as everyone she meets begins to provide for her, and she leads a happy, casual life. She laments that she can never feel true love because of the power of her Geass. Her personality at this point is somewhat childish, as she's become spoiled from everyone around her treating her so kindly and giving her whatever she wants all of the time. When her Geass finally becomes strong enough, the nun that granted her Geass, the one person who was immune to her Geass, and therefore the one person C2 could trust, was revealed to be luring her into a trap all along. This is the first of many deaths that C2 suffers, and it's the moment when she is doomed to immortality. I think this is a very important moment in C2's mentality, because this traumatic moment is preceded by the woman she trusted who ultimately betrayed her, telling her how horrible it is to be unable to die. This series of events undoubtedly replays in C2's heads thousands of times in the centuries to come. Every time she survives something that no mortal woman could, every time she endures a level of pain or torture that would kill her if not for her code, and that mindset of immortality being more of a curse than a gift begins to rub off on her. Hearing something in such a life-changing moment can have long-lasting effects, but only if it's supported by her own beliefs. I believe there's more to the story of C2's death wish. Not too much is known about C2's life after receiving the code, but it is known that there were a number of times when she was persecuted as a witch and tortured, and that they attempted to execute her numerous times without success. Due to losing her Geass power, she could not compel the men and women who couldn't understand her to leave her alone. She went from being a girl spoiled by her own power to control others, back to being powerless, and at the mercy of individuals who felt nothing but malice towards her. In this harsh environment, she began to view her gift of immortality as the ultimate curse. Because she could not die, she was forced to endure even more pain. Eventually, C2 joins Charles and V2 in their plan. Her reasons for joining are never specified, but it's likely that it was only so her wish for death would be granted. V2 was able to take someone else's code when he was only 10 years old, so he'd be able to do the same for her when the time came. It was like a Geass contract. She'd help them achieve her goal, and they'd grant her wish. Ultimately, she decided that the world they were trying to create wasn't one that she wanted to support, so she abandoned the Geass Directorate, searching for new ways to have her wish granted. After this, she meets Mao. The Geass she grants Mao allows him to read the minds of others. He quickly loses control of the Geass, causing him to hear the thoughts of every person he encounters at all times. This drives him away from people, as the overwhelming sea of thoughts that he hears whenever he enters a crowd drives him mad. So he turns to only C2 for comfort and companionship, as she's the only person whose thoughts he won't hear, and her words of encouragement soothe him. In the first scene of Code Geass, we see that C2 kept tabs on Lelouch when he was a child, presumably assuming that he would be a strong Geass user like his mother, father, and uncle were, and therefore become someone who could fulfill her wish. However, rather than approach him while he was still a boy, she decided to wait to involve him. I believe that she waited partially because she felt that it would be too risky to approach the son of the man she was trying to avoid so soon after he left Britannia, and possibly because she had reservations about giving Geass to the son of her dear friend, Marianne. C2 views Geass as a curse, as demonstrated in her monologue about how Geass is a power that isolates the user from the rest of humanity. This is why she views herself as a witch. Beyond just being perceived as one numerous times in the past, she can't deny those claims because her life forces her to deal out the Geass power to others. She's forced to deal out curses, much like a witch. Ultimately, C2 decides to leave Mao as well. She tells Lelouch that she abandoned him because Mao couldn't fulfill his side of the contract. But I think that part of the reason she left is that she couldn't bear to see how Mao was tormented every day by the Geass that she gave him. From the beginning, she intended to use him to grant her wish, but she did begin to care about him as they spent time together. And ultimately, she did feel guilty about ruining Mao's life with the curse of Geass. So she decided to leave him behind and try again. Unfortunately, it's shortly after this point that she's captured by Viceroy Clovis, probably as she re-enters Japan to find Lelouch. Not much is known of her time as Clovis's science project, but we can presume that she was interrogated and experimented on, so nothing new for her. But finally, in episode 1, she's reunited with Lelouch, and saves his life by jumping in front of a gun aimed at him. "He mustn't die," she yells as she intercepts the bullet with the Geass sigil on her forehead. This moment was easily misinterpreted by me as a child, as a sign that she actually cared about Lelouch at this time, when really she just wanted to keep him alive because he was her best chance at finding someone who could grant her wish. She warns him that Geass will condemn him to a life of solitude, revealing her opinion of the power in their first interaction. Lelouch accepts anyway and immediately begins using the power for his own goals. Everything's going smoothly as far as C2's concerned. She returns in episode 5, making herself comfortable in Lelouch's home, imposing that she will be by Lelouch's side until he completes his side of the contract. In episode 7, she attempts to protect Lelouch's life by preventing him from going into battle against Cornelia. She even goes so far as to threaten to shoot him in the leg. To convince her to let him leave, he points a gun to his own head, explaining that before he began his crusade against Britannia, he lived a meaningless life that he would rather die than return to. These words strike a chord in C2, and she decides to let Lelouch go because she feels similarly about her own life. Now we see a glimpse of C2's mentality. She views her life as meaningless because she has nothing to live for, so she longs for its end, but the code that she's been cursed with denies that release. As such, she's willing to do anything to break that curse. But she isn't prepared to let Lelouch die yet, as seen when she saves him from certain defeat by pretending to appear as Zero before the Britannian army to allow him to escape their clutches. C2 starts off by planning to use Lelouch to help her achieve her goal, but over time, like with Mao, she begins to care for him and wants him to succeed, because unlike Charles, who she once helped, she actually agrees with the world Lelouch is trying to create. Speaking of Mao, he meets with C2 twice after she abandons him. She tries to take responsibility for his existence both times. The first time, she goes to meet with him alone to talk things out, or to kill him if that goes poorly, as demonstrated by the gun she brought to the meeting. The second time, she embraces Mao, shooting him in the head and ending his life. She feels responsible for Mao's madness, because she cursed him with the Geass that isolated him from the rest of the world, causing him to become obsessed with her. Throughout the entirety of Code Geass, we see C2 evolve from just wanting to metaphorically use Lelouch as a noose, to actually caring about and wanting to support him. I think this character progression means a lot more when you consider where she started from. Not long before Lelouch left Britannia, C2 was willing to condemn an entire world just to finally end her own existence. Her self-loathing and sheer boredom made the pain of life not worth living, especially knowing that she was cursed with a power that would only bring pain to herself and those around her. The irony is that she was forced to use that power to curse others with the same fate to be able to escape it herself. She ultimately turned into the nun that betrayed her, but rather than condemning one person, by going along with Charles' plan as long as she did, she demonstrated that after centuries of a meaningless life, she was willing to condemn the entire world if that's what it took. This was the magnitude of her death wish. Clearly she had a change of heart, which is why she abandoned the program. But in the end, it was only through meeting Lelouch that she learned to accept life, as seen by the epilogue. A year after Lelouch's public death, C2 is still alive. Lelouch at this point is arguably the most powerful Geass user ever, so there's no reason he wouldn't have been able to take her code. Lelouch would be more than willing to do this favor for her, given how much they cared for each other. So the fact that she's still alive indicates that by this point in the series, C2's death wish had finally subsided. The true reason for this will almost certainly be revealed in R3, but I hypothesize that she's finally hopeful for the world and wants to see how things turn out. And if the theories about Lelouch's Code Geass are true, maybe she wants to live a bit longer by Lelouch's side. At the end of the day, there's only one anime girl for Zero, and her name is C2. I've been setting this line up since Hoodie and I first made this channel.